Bloomberg Audio Studios.
Podcasts, radio, news.
How much do you think we can rip out of this wasted $6.5 trillion Harris-Biden budget?
Well, I think we could do at least $2 trillion.
So was Elon Musk being asked last month by one of the frontrunners to be Donald Trump's Treasury Secretary, Frank Lutnick, about how much money he thinks he could cut from the US budget. Musk is now in charge of trying to scale back the federal government in the United States. Does that idea sound familiar? Hello, you're listening to Bloomberg UK Politics. I'm Stephen Carroll.
And I'm Lizzy Burden. Welcome to the programme. I mean, Stephen, I know Elon's had a lot of great ideas, but I don't think he was the inventor of this one.
No, and I think anyone who's paid attention to politics here, even in the UK over the past decade or two, will have heard the promise on many occasions to cut back wasteful government spending. Cap the civil service was a recent idea under Jeremy Hunt. That had to be scrapped pretty quickly as well. And the question about how you make the money that you're investing in government departments go further and how much you optimally should be spending is one that's open for a lot of debate in both sides of the political spectrum.
Yeah, it's a time-old debate here in the UK and around the world. But let's also note that a lot's changed for the Chancellor Rachel Reeves since her budget, principally that Donald Trump is coming back to the White House. And in anticipation of Trump's economic plans, you've seen the 10-year US Treasury yield inching higher every day. There's a risk that could translate across the pond. Already, since the budget, because of the gilt market reaction, any headroom that Reeves had left herself has been wiped out. But given that she's ruled out another fiscal event before autumn next year, and when you've got tax rises and austerity both politically toxic, you got to wonder what options she has to deal with the situation.
Yeah, and indeed, is perhaps Elon Musk's proposition somewhere that Rachel Reeves could be looking for answers? Let's bring in our senior economics reporter, Phil Aldrick, for more on this. Phil, does Rachel Reeves need an Elon Musk?
I mean, arguably every government needs some version of Elon Musk there in terms of just if you can obviously strip out inefficiencies within government, that would be enormously welcome. I mean, as you say, chancellors in the past have promised to do it and struggled to do so. So, it'd be a surprise if Musk or somebody in the UK was able to deliver meaningfully on that.
But is there actually scope to make the UK government more efficient, or is efficiency just austerity in sheep's clothing?
I think the latter. Efficiency is a gentle way of saying austerity. When Elon Musk says he's going to take $2 trillion out of the budget of government spending, he's not going to do that by increasing productivity, back office personnel. He's going to do that by scrapping plans, scrapping huge spending items. So in the UK, we're doing the exact opposite, really, if you think about it. The whole principle of Labour government is one of their principles is to end austerity, and what we saw in the budget was actually an increase in spending. We've seen an increase in the size of the state, so how much government spending there is, by about 5 percentage points, to around 44% of GDP from before the pandemic. Obviously it increased a bit in the pandemic, but even against the Tories' plans, it's going to end up settling at about the size of the state is going to end up settling at about 2 percentage points higher than had been planned under the Tories. So we're not seeing plans for austerity, but within that they could be doing things which actually make public services work more efficiently, and that would be enormously helpful.
Does that necessarily translate into a headline amount of money that goes into sectors of the state as well? Because, I mean, if we think about the scale of what Elon Musk is talking about, he's talking about $2 trillion, around a third of the size of the federal budget. But then, you know, most of that money the federal government in the US spends is on social security, it's on pensions, it's on defence, things that arguably you probably don't want to be cutting back, or certainly politically would be very difficult to cut back. Surely the UK faces the same problem, that in fact quite a lot of government spending goes on things that no politician could ever reasonably expect to cut back.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess the austerity versus efficiency language here is should be clarified. So I mean, if what Musk is planning is austerity, but under different language, then that is not what's going to be happening in the UK quite clearly. So what we're going to be doing is the more honest language around efficiency, which does sometimes require upfront funding. So you've seen a big bung for the NHS, for example, in the most recent spending review, and that will be part of that will be to clear backlogs, to make the NHS work a bit better as a result of removing all of these constraints and all these bottlenecks that are just making it very difficult to operate properly. Alongside the money, though, Wes Streeting has been making very clear that there's going to be more money, but it needs to come with reform. So you're going to see. I mean, he's already been talking about sacking NHS chief executives who are trust chief executives who are failing. So his objective is clearly to make the system work better, and making the system work better will bring through efficiencies in the more traditional sense, in the more sort of business sense of we're basically a leaner organisation that is delivering a much better return in this case in terms of healthcare outcomes. So, but obviously in the corporate world it would be better margins.
But is that very different to what Tory health secretaries said? Here's some money, but you have to spend it wisely.
Yeah, every government attaches some kind of productivity goal to the money that they're adding to the system. These productivity targets are endlessly missed. There's particular reasons for that. With healthcare in particular, you've got aging society. You've got as technology advances, you actually end up having more money spent in the health service because more of these technologies and scientific advances are start to be paid for by the state. So there are reasons why it's actually very difficult to increase productivity in the sort of corporate sense within the public sector. But one of the big things which obviously we're going to do, and obviously talk about health here because health is about 40% of public spending, so it's a real big.
And probably set to rise with an aging population as well.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's
the
exactly
demands on that service.
Exactly, the pressures are only going to get worse. So you do have to find some way to deal with this. And there is clearly massive efficiencies that can be made. Through Wes Streeting and the government talk about the use of AI, deploying AI across government services, so you can strip out sort of unnecessary cost. And in the health service, one simple thing is that obviously loads of records are not properly combined. And so at the moment they've got Palantir doing a big project at the NHS to sort of to clean up all of the data across the different platforms, and these little things can actually generate genuine efficiencies, and you can have money with reform which can deliver efficiencies. It's not an Elon Musk style 2 trillion, effectively austerity.
But of course it is a big upfront expense. And Phil, you've been writing about Rachel Reeves's limited headroom. I wonder how likely you think it is that she's going to have to hold another fiscal event, a spring budget, for example, before this time next year, the way things are going.
She won't call it a spring budget, but she has no fiscal headroom left against her targets. She has a choice of either having 6 to 8 months before she holds her budget of being accused of having broken her own rules. She's not going to do that. She is going to step in and do something, raise some taxes to make sure that find some other forms of savings to make sure that she does meet her fiscal rules. At the moment, she is on track to miss her fiscal rules by the end of March, because the OBR must do a second forecast before April. And we've seen movements in market interest rates which have already wiped out her headroom. The Trump effect on growth in the UK potentially, and Goldman Sachs downgraded our outlook. So that is another factor which may knock the headroom down. And so Reeves it looks at the moment like it's inevitable that she's going to come back with more tax rises before April.
But that's 2 broken promises instead of 1. More tax rises, another budget. Rather than breaking the fiscal rules, surely it would be politically disastrous. She's just going to have loads of headlines about broken promises.
It's one broken promise or another.
Yeah, I mean, it's having to make a political choice, I guess, on that front. But I do wonder, we've had this movement to a bigger state since the pandemic, right? That means that the bill of what it costs to run a government is getting higher. The other part of it is, again, demographics, like pension costs are projected to rise too. I mean, surely the trajectory, and I'm not just talking about the UK, but kind of broadly in Western societies, is that the state is going to need to be bigger in the future if it's going to continue to provide the sort of things that we do already. Is this going to be a debate that we're going to look back on and sort of laugh wryly about in 20 years and say, oh, do you remember when we thought that we would be able to get the state smaller?
Yeah, there's all these massive pressures on the demographic pressures are going to be a massive problem. The Paul Johnson from the IFS, or ex of the IFS now, he's said for years that there needs to be a proper national conversation about how we deal with these challenges, because obviously, as you say, the age-related spending, which is also health-related, age and health-related spending, are going up massively. And so how do we deal with that? It's going to require choices. We've had the windfall of the peace dividend, as people call it, when the defence budgets were effectively shrunk as a share of GDP. That's all gone. So there's all these massive pressures on public spending. So to go back to efficiencies, it is absolutely vital that we do make our public services work as efficiently as possible, because we don't have the capacity to just waste loads, billions and billions of pounds. But I mean, that is, the track record there is not promising.
These are big ideas. Fortunately, we've got a big speech coming from the Chancellor tomorrow at Mansion House. Of course, it's really focused on the square mile, her pitch to grow financial services in the UK. How much do you expect we will actually hear about Donald Trump and efficiency as well?
I don't think she'll mention Donald Trump by name, but his sort of presence will be felt, because I mean, there's all this. She's sounds like she's going to be talking about how she's a great fan of free trade, which is rather distinct from the sort of tariffs and protectionism that Trump's talking about. So, then there's all there's going to be sort of pension reforms. It seems, at the Mansion House. Jeremy Hunt was trying pension reforms. George Osborne tried pension reforms. I'd be really interested to see.
Telling us there are no new ideas.
I'd be really interested to see how Rachel Reeves' pension reforms are going to be very different to the previous attempts.
And we will look forward to hearing the details, and of course bringing you a discussion of them on the programme as well. Phil Aldrick, our senior economics reporter, thank you very much for joining us. Lizzy, I know that you'll be watching closely as well for the details of the Mansion House speech later this week, and we will be able to bring you details of those announcements. That is it from us for today, though. If you like the programme, don't forget to subscribe, give it 5 stars so other people can find it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen.
This episode was produced by James Wilcock, and our audio engineer was Sean Guastamakia. I'm Lizzy Burden.
And I'm Stephen Carroll. We'll be back with more tomorrow. This is Bloomberg.
Bloomberg UK Politics. Listen weekdays at noon on DAB Digital Radio in London.